Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
I'm Lola Blanc.
And I'm Megan Elizabeth.
And we're the hosts of Trust Me, the podcast about cults, extreme belief, and the abuse of power.
Now on Podcast 1.
We're real-life cult survivors.
And we're here to tell you anyone can join a cult.
If you've ever dived headfirst into a new self-help program,
or believed wholeheartedly in a spiritual practice,
or even just trusted someone with your life,
guess what? You're just as susceptible as everyone else.
No one is safe, especially not Megan.
I'm the most susceptible.
We want to debunk the myth that people who join cults are uneducated or naive or broken, because anyone can be manipulated by a narcissist or feel good in a new group they've joined.
And we should know we both have been.
Join us every week as we explore the world of extreme belief,
talk to survivors and experts,
and share our own experiences with cults and the abuse of power.
Don't be fooled. You might be next.
Get new episodes of Trust Me every Wednesday on Podcast 1, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcasts.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, we conclude our look at the Lindsay Buziak case. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my plenitudinous co-host, Alice.
I'm sorry. I try to wait until you finish before I start laughing, but that was like so multisyllabic, and I have no idea what you just said, but it sounded like, I don't know, so sing-song. It sounded like a piano.
I don't really know what it means, honestly. I don't know who gave me that one, but it sounds good. I think it probably is good. So I'm going to assume that's a good word because it's filled, it's the thought that counts. And Alice, it's filled with goodwill and good thoughts. So whatever the word actually means doesn't matter.
Guys, words absolutely matter. I'm just going to make a disclaimer for what Brett said. Words do matter. Words matter a lot, says a lawyer.
Well, if somebody else there wants to figure out what it means and let us know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, I will take the judgment of my peers.
Well, Brett, I'm really glad we're back because this case has been haunting me because we kind of just left off last time without really getting a chance to discuss all the strange aspects of this case with each other. So I've been dying to know what you think because you've been out of town since we first started recording this series.
And we're going to talk about it today, Alice. I mean, it's one of those cases where I feel like the timeline in a lot of ways tells the story, but really what we're going to do is kind of back up and go through a lot of this stuff in more detail. And look, there's some strange things about this case. There are some things that don't quite make sense. Obviously, it's been a while now. We talk about this sometimes. It's just time passes and people's memories change and people's stories change. And a changing story is not necessarily a sign that someone's lying. I mean, it might be a sign that someone's lying. And it's certainly something you should consider. But it's always important when you're thinking about this kind of stuff to remember how people are, that memories change, even shocking memories. I always go back to this one study that always blew my mind about 9/11 and how people remembered 9/11 in ways that could not have been true. They remembered things happening that they could not have experienced, that they could not have seen. And that always blew my mind. And I always wondered, are my memories from 9/11 accurate? Because sitting here today, 20 something years later, I can remember exactly everything that happened that day. But statistically speaking, some of that's not true, or it happened on a different day, and I'm conflating days. I'm remembering phone calls that maybe happened a day later, and I'm remembering things that happened that might have happened at some other time. And that happens in this case. There are stories that people tell us, particularly about Lindsay and her state of mind, and where she was at, and what she was thinking, and what she's scared or not scared, that now have created kind of a gulf and have created some suspicions about some people in this case. And we're going to talk about that. But yeah, Alice, I think the thing to do is to go through some of these little clues in this case and go through them in detail. And this is a case that starts with a phone call. And I think our best bet is to start with the phone calls in this case and take a look at them in more detail. So when Lindsay received the initial phone call from this person who was offering to really, in a lot of ways, launch her on her dream, give her her first big sale as a real estate agent, the woman on the other end told her that her husband had been transferred into the area and they needed a home quickly. This is a pretty good story. It's a pretty common thing, particularly where Alice and I live. We have a lot of people in the military who are coming in and out, so it wouldn't be unusual at all. This is the capital of that area of Canada, so also probably not surprising that people would be coming in and out. So wouldn't have shocked her that someone would need a house quickly. Now, it is true, they not only needed a place quickly, they had money to burn. I mean, this was in many ways the perfect situation. A motivated buyer coming to you with $1 million saying, we need a place and we need a place now. It had to seem like a great opportunity for Lindsay. The woman on the other end of the line had a Mexican or Spanish accent. It's a little unclear exactly what it is. But in fact, as we've said before, Lindsay listed the phone number in her phone as, quote, the Mexicans. Now, Spanish is an interesting language. I guess there actually is a distinction between Castilian Spanish, the way it's spoken in Mexico. I'm doing this Babbel thing, which is one of our advertisers. I promise you, I'm not just throwing it out there because of that. But I'm doing this Babbel thing, and you can choose in the beginning whether you want to do Castilian Spanish or Spanish as it's spoken in Mexico. So I guess it was a little different. I don't know if Lindsay was familiar enough with Spanish to know those distinctions, but she certainly listed these people in her phone, at least, as the Mexicans. The police eventually were able to track the phone. As we said, it was a burner phone. And in fact, it was only used to call Lindsay. Recall, this phone was purchased in November, the year before this murder happened. So these people had had this phone for a few months, and it wasn't the only phone they had. A second burner phone was used to check the messages on the first burner phone. So if Lindsay called the burner phone, it might be checked by a second burner phone that they also had. The police were able to track the registration on this phone. It was registered to Paulo Rodriguez, a name that was determined to be fake, though this goes along with the accent that the lady was using. I think most people, if they're creating a fake name, probably create a fake name that is the same ethnicity as they are. Don't have any statistics to back that up, but it just feels like the kind of thing that you would do. So it's not surprising to me.
There's just like consistency in your lie, right? So if for some reason someone were to look up the name, Paolo would at least not raise flags because wow, that kind of matches what I would expect Paolo to sound like, perhaps, if they're trying to make their lie consistent.
Yeah. And just if I was creating a fake name, it would never enter my mind to use a Japanese surname, or call myself like Vladimir Orchinsky or something like that. I just wouldn't do that. I would use a name I would be Bob Smith, probably a little bit more creative than that, but it would be something like that is what I would use. So I think all this kind of fits. There are some people who think the lady is faking the accent, that this is a fake accent. I don't think it's a fake accent. And I think this sort of goes along with that, though I guess if you were smart enough to fake the accent, you might fake the name too.
Brett, this is really interesting because, just by talking about these burner phones, a couple things become very clear that Lindsay was targeted, right? The fact that this phone was bought specifically to call Lindsay, it was bought to do nothing else whatsoever. So this is not some random, let's see which kind of real estate agent we can get to meet us at a house. At least they targeted her with respect to her phone number, and they didn't try and spam lots of real estate agents, for example, with the burner phone and see who picked up. And second, the fact that they had enough forethought to buy a second burner phone to call the first burner phone to check messages shows that there's a high level of coordination and thought here. It wasn't a off the cuff decision to call a real estate agent with a burner phone.
And I want to go even deeper than that because I think you're right, but I think it's even more sort of complex here. I don't actually think the phone was purchased for the purpose of using it on Lindsay, but the phone was purchased for the purpose of some nefarious end. It was bought in November. It was activated to target Lindsay. It wasn't activated until the end of January, just days before this murder. So the purposefulness of this phone, it's as if some sort of criminal entity purchased this phone with the knowledge, hey, like any other business, we got to have supplies, right? And one of the things we need are burner phones. We're going to use these burner phones at some point for our nefarious activities. So we're buying burner phones, but we only activate it once we have a purpose for it. And I think this phone was activated exactly as you're saying to target Lindsay. In my mind, there's no question that Lindsay was the target here. This was not random. This was not someone who just decided, as you said, hey, let's go kill a real estate agent. They did this intentionally with the plan of targeting her, and that's what they used this phone for. It had one very specific purpose, and that was to target Lindsay, and that's exactly what they did. As we said earlier, Lindsay asked the lady how she found out about her. And what's interesting about this is the lady says that she got a referral from one of Lindsay's clients. Now, none of Lindsay's clients have ever admitted that they were the one who gave this referral. In some versions of the story, and this is not entirely clear, the person gives a specific name, and that person was out of town at the time, and Lindsay could not actually check with them. If that's true, and I don't know if it is, but if that's true, it's even more of a level of planning to not only pick one of Lindsay's clients, but to pick someone that you would have known could not contradict your story. Honestly, it's such a good flourish that I almost don't think it's true, that I almost think that's an embellishment, because to do that would be, it's just such a deep level of thinking and scoping this out, not only of Lindsay, but of the other entities you're going to use. It's possible because this is clearly something pretty sophisticated going on here, but man, that's mind-blowing if that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about a couple more aspects because there really is so much to talk about. Let's talk about Lindsay's coworkers. Shirley Zalo is Lindsay's boyfriend's Jason's mother. Remember, we had talked about Jason's family being in the real estate business. According to Shirley, Lindsay never expressed any fear about this real estate showing. Instead, she was excited about the more than $30,000 of commission she was looking at if she was able to sell a house in the $1 million range. Her main concern was all the things she had to get done before the showing in order to secure that sale. Other coworkers, however, told a different story than Shirley. Cal Faber was also a colleague of Lindsay's, and he was in the office when Lindsay spoke about the listing. Faber, a former RCMP officer, said that everyone thought the offer seemed strange and suspicious, and Cal even offered to go with Lindsay, telling her that as a former cop, he could make sure that she'd be safe, she'd be fine. Lindsay told Cal that Jason was going with her, and there was no way she'd go alone. So it's really interesting, obviously hindsight 2020, but it is interesting that there are two very different stories about what Lindsay felt. Now, we've talked about this in the first episode. It could be that someone isn't telling the truth, or it could be something much less nefarious where we talked about Lindsay may have been a lot more anxious than she actually verbalized. So maybe she verbalized it to Cal because Cal was a former law enforcement officer and maybe he was the first one to bring up the safety issue. And then once he did, maybe she felt confident enough in her feelings that she was like, well, it is a little bit strange, but we don't need to jump to conclusions. I don't need, a former law enforcement officer with me. I'll have someone else with me. Yeah, I am a little bit nervous. But if maybe Shirley was more just enthusiastic because Shirley may have had these types of big $1 million clients all the time. And it's like a rite of passage for a real estate agent, is viewing it more of a, wow, this is so exciting. Aren't you excited to, make this threshold in your professional career? And Lindsay may have heard that and wanted to match Shirley's excitement. So I'm giving you an example of maybe nobody's lying. It's possible that Lindsay just kind of portrayed different aspects of how she was feeling about this deal, depending on how the other person was reacting to the offer.
And I'm a big believer in truth and that there is objective truth. There is a true and a right and a wrong and all that stuff. But when you get to things like this that are subjective and they're all in somebody's head, it is so easy over the passage of time with external pressures to see this kind of change happening. My opinion on this, I think that Cal's story is probably closer to the truth, though everything is clouded by 2020 hindsight. I could see Cal having a conversation like this with Lindsay, but her not being as afraid as maybe he makes her out to be now. But in his mind, this has become amplified, obviously because she was killed, obviously because he really wishes that she had let him go with her. So in his mind, she was very concerned and very worried, and he wishes he had gone. On the alternate side, you have Shirley and you have Jason. And I bet that what happened is Lindsay probably did less fulsomely to Cal or to them than she did to Cal, or less full-throatedly might be a better way to put it. People have problems with my usage of fulsome. But in any event, less full-throatedly to Shirley and Jason than she did to Cal, may have expressed some concerns. And I think, like Alice was saying, probably lesser, just because it's funny. Sometimes you can share things with people you aren't close to more easily than you can with people you are close to, because there's no fear that Cal's going to think badly of you or you're going to let Cal down. But she wants Shirley and Jason to be impressed with her, to think highly of her. She wants Shirley to think, man, I'm so glad my son is marrying this go-getter. I mean, there's all sorts of emotional things there. So even if she does have concerns, she may not be as full-throated about them. And even if she is, it seems like Shirley and Jason probably didn't think it was a big deal. And it seems like their reaction to this was, well, you're probably overreacting. It's not that big a deal. And you can imagine how in the years and now decade or more that have passed, that in their minds, they would want to tamp down and to minimize her concern because of guilt on their end. Because if they had taken her more seriously, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And I think this combination of things has led to this gap in people's perception and people's memory about what happened and how concerned Lindsay was. I'm not really sure how concerned Lindsay was, because you hear different things from different people. I think she did have concerns, and I think she did have that voice inside of her saying there's something wrong with this. This is too good to be true. But I'm not sure that it's sort of to either extreme, either of ease or concern that you hear from anyone. I think the reality is lost somewhere in the middle, and we'll never really know what the truth is. With a lot of these cases, we always talk about how one of the reasons they're mysteries often, unfortunately, is initial reaction by the police, or even long-term reaction by the police, is not exactly what you would have liked. And there has been some criticism of the way the police handled this scene. According to one of the paramedics, the police did a very poor job of securing the scene. Police were in and out of the scene, and they weren't wearing protective gear. Police would later say that when they initially arrived, they didn't think that the call was as serious as it was. And recall, there are 2 911 calls. Police had already been dispatched because of that first 911 call. Those police, they'd be coming to a 911 hang-up. So you could really imagine them getting there and missing the communication that this is a bigger deal. And then you just have some patrol officers who go wandering into the house, not realizing, oh my goodness, this is a crime scene. And then you have other people coming in who've gotten the call from Jason, but they may also not know just how bad this is. Whatever the case, everybody was quickly disabused of the notion that this was some simple crime. Blood was apparently everywhere. There was no sexual assault, and Lindsay hadn't been robbed. This was a murder for murder's sake. The police, they knew the people who did this. They couldn't have been that far away. They combed the neighborhood looking for the murderer, and it's likely that they initially believed this was some sort of random attacker or a crazed murderer, somebody who was probably hiding nearby in a dumpster or in a bush, and that if they just combed the immediate area, they'd find this person. Of course, they found nothing. The other thing they didn't find, there was no evidence of motive at the scene. As we said, Lindsay wasn't sexually assaulted. In fact, the murder happened so quickly and the people escaped so quickly that there's no way they could have done anything to her. But they also didn't grab anything as they were on their way out. They didn't grab her jewelry. They didn't grab her money. They didn't grab her purse. All of her stuff was still there. When the police are standing there on this scene, this bloody scene with this young woman being stabbed multiple times, they have no idea why this happened.
And the law enforcement officers see a lot of things, but you remember when you walk into a scene, especially if it's chaotic and you aren't, you answer lots of 911 calls, you don't really always get these types of calls. And so even if you've gone on lots of murder scenes, they're always jarring at first. And you're trying to kind of process a bunch of inputs all at one time, random or targeted, friend or foe, current danger to the society, or the risk has been mitigated. All of these things you're trying to process all at once. Are my officers safe? Is the person still possibly breathing? Is there any hope of saving them? I mean, these are all things that you're trying to prioritize in your mind when you are the first responding officer. And we only say that to explain, what's going on in these officers' minds as they show up, and how it's very easy in a calm, cool, collected state as you're looking at someone else's cold, hard file, as opposed to being in the middle of like a blood-soaked scene, to assess, obviously, the right choice would be to do X, Y, and Z. It's easy to do that when you're not kind of in the heat of the chaos.
And I think so much criticism of police is ill-founded because it is chaos and you're operating with imperfect information. And the simple fact of the matter is you can't do 100% of everything in every case. And you see this in a lot of cases. And invariably, cases that become famous, one of the reasons is because the police, they didn't nail down everything because they didn't think they had to, because they thought they had the guy. And now 20 years later, people are coming back and they're poking holes and you're like, man, I wish they just talked to that one guy. If they just talked to that one guy, so much would be solved. But they didn't. And, we're going to see more stuff the police could have done, maybe should have done, that they didn't do in this case. And maybe that's the reason that a case that feels like it should be solved remains unsolved so many years later.
That's right. And so what do the police do? They obviously start looking at suspects. And one of the people of interest, or people that are interesting to look at, is Matt McDuff. Matt was Lindsay's boyfriend before Jason. We've talked about this. Sometimes it's just looking at who is closest to the victim. And that's always going to be either a spouse or a significant other or an ex-significant other. And Matt falls into that category. Now, Matt claims to have had no contact for a year prior to Lindsay's murder. He says he took a lie detector test and had an alibi. But according to Dateline NBC, Lindsay had called the police on Matt 3 times. Now, Matt completely denies this, and it's unclear where Dateline gets this information about Lindsay calling the police on Matt. But even Matt admits that they had a stormy, unstable relationship. Nevertheless, the police appear to have ruled him out. And so that brings us to her current boyfriend, Jason, and what Jason and Lindsay's relationship really looked like. Some of Lindsay's friends thought Jason was controlling and had cut Lindsay off from her friends. Just before Christmas, Lindsay told some of her friends that she wanted to get out of the relationship. Jason would deny this to Dateline. Jason is occasionally described as unemotional after Lindsay's murder, though Lindsay's own family says that this isn't true. And this is just really difficult. Again, you never know what's going on the inside of a relationship from the outside looking in. And when there is a murder and that the person who's been murdered has a current significant other, they're going to fall under a lot of suspicion. People will wonder if that one little tiny spat was actually indicative of something much worse brewing under the cover and we didn't know what was going on and maybe he was abusive, in fact. But as you can tell, this is kind of just after the fact, people trying to speculate what their relationship was like.
Yeah, and this is This is obviously going to be everyone's first look. You look at some of the former boyfriends, you look at the current boyfriend, you're going to do that. And it's not wrong that the police looked at Jason, and obviously suspicion's going to fall on him. But one thing I always like to remind people of, if Jason's innocent, then he is very much a victim here too, and just lost the love of his life. And that's something to remember when you're looking at the evidence. Murder on the Island, which is one of the podcasts we've talked about, did a great job on this case. They interviewed Jason. Jason, his position, once again, with the benefit of 15 years, is that everything was great. And then there was no indication that Lindsay wanted to leave him. And I just want to remind everyone, even if her friends are like, yeah, that's not true, she told me this and this and that. Number one, he may not have known that. And number two, he's obviously going to look back through rose-colored glasses. So I don't know that this really tells you anything. We're always looking for sort of clues about whether or not someone's guilty and the words they say and the things that they tell interviewers. To me, this is what you would expect to hear from both a guilty and an innocent person. Now, Jason, as we've said, also takes a position that Lindsay wasn't suspicious or worried about this sale, but rather she was excited. One thing I think to note is this does contradict some of Jason's own story from the time of the murder when he said that she was concerned this was too good to be true. This is another place where those initial statements to police put a lot more stock in those, because those are without that benefit of hindsight, without the problem of, it's funny, we talk about hindsight being a benefit, and it is, but the more time that passes, the more it also dulls reality. And you begin to see sort of the perfect picture or the idealized picture of the past and not the reality. And I think maybe we're having a little of that here. Now, there's also the fact that Jason does go with Lindsay and he hangs around outside. Why did he do this if everything was fine? Jason has said that both he and his mother had offered to show the house for Lindsay, but not because they were concerned for her health. Lindsay was supposed to go to this Vancouver party we talked about last time with friends, and Jason said he could cover the showing. This doesn't really explain why he showed up that day if he wasn't concerned. I think it's pretty obvious that Lindsay did have some concerns, and she wanted him there as a backup, though not there hovering over her while she was doing this. Jason also talked to the woman on the phone, or at least he told the police that at the time. This is something that's critical that unfortunately Jason's story has changed on. He now says in his interview with Murder on the Island that he does not recall talking to this woman, though he thinks it's true, which is the kind of thing you could only say if he's being honest. You could only say, I don't remember that, but I think it's true, if that's actually something that happened, because you would never lie like that. That's such a terrible lie. You wouldn't tell that lie. It would be nice to know what he thought about the woman, but in any event, he doesn't really remember. He says that going with Lindsay was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing, and this also contradicts what other witnesses who said that no, he had planned to go with Lindsay the whole time. When Jason initially spoke to the police, he said he saw the back of the man describing his jacket. Jason now says that he doesn't recall seeing the man, though he also says that he probably did see him, and he probably did tell police that. So, look, but Jason's basically useless now. Whatever information we got from Jason is the information we got at the time. A lot of time's passed. He's obviously moved on with his life. And I think mentally he has closed this out. So even some of the things you would hope he remembers, he no longer does.
Yeah. And this is hard to say because, we don't know how serious their relationship was, even if on the outside it looked very serious. But it is kind of strange that something very traumatic happens, and you would think he'd remember certain things surrounding that, and he doesn't now. But part of it might be that he didn't marry Lindsay. It's not like he had a long marriage to her, that they had children together. And this is whatever happened was also traumatic for Jason. And so he may have very well just wanted to block it all out. But I do think it's kind of strange that he can't remember if he saw the man, for example. It feels like since he, found Lindsay dead pretty soon after seeing that man, he could remember that fact. But trauma does strange things to people's minds and memories, so that it could be possible. But I do think it's a little strange that he can't remember that fact. And we've talked a little bit about the police investigation, but let's talk more about what the police investigation unveiled. With Jason and Matt ruled out, the police also came to the conclusion that no one Lindsay knew was involved in her killing, and that the murder was not related to her job. This wasn't how things started, though. Initially, the police focused on Jason and his friend Cohen, given that they're the ones who found Lindsay's body. We said this before, that's a very natural place to start. If you found the body, you're going to be on a list of suspects. You can be ruled out, of course, but if you found it, prepare to be investigated. Jason will complain bitterly to this day that the police focused on him rather than shutting down the island, and really, he has a legit complaint. Vancouver Island is just that. It's an island. You can't get off of it without taking a ferry, and there are no bridges to the mainland. So there's like one way in, one way out. And had the police acted quicker, they would have either found the killers or forced them to remain on the island longer than they probably would have liked, and just increased the chances of them being found out by the police.
And of course, this is easy for us to say, and it's easy for Jason to complain about. How practical is it for the police to shut down all the ferries from the island on which sits the capital of the province and tens of thousands of people live and work and travel to every day? I don't know that that's really that practical. I don't know that you can do that for a murder, but it is something that bothers Jason, and you can imagine why it would. And if you had all the power in the world and you could do this, it probably would have been problematic for the killers. But as we said, the police did not initially think this was some sort of complicated plot to kill her by people who did not live on the island. They thought this was probably some sort of random attack. So, hard to blame the police. Another example of hindsight being 20/20, but it definitely does seem like had the police acted more quickly, maybe we would have solved this crime.
And that's a really good point, too. Even if they had closed off Vancouver Island, they may not have found the killers, because Vancouver Island isn't some like small remote island that no one's on, right? You said it's like the capital. And so it's not going to be a small town where people are going to say, that guy clearly doesn't live here and he's suspicious. Go look at him. We're talking about a place where a lot of people come, live, and work. So even if they had shut it down, they can't shut it down indefinitely. And the likelihood of them being able to move quickly enough to uncover someone because enough people say, oh, that person looks suspicious, is just probably low on the list of their investigative tactics. And Jason cooperated with the police investigation. He turned over his cell phone and his laptop for their review. You know, we've talked about this. You can get a search warrant for these sorts of things, but an individual can also just consent to those things without a court order. And that's what Jason did here. A lot of people do that when they want to show, like, I'm cooperating, I have nothing to hide. Of course, please find the killer of my girlfriend. And he allowed the police to search his condo. He also took a polygraph test, which we've talked about polygraph tests and how they're not admissible in court, and we don't really think they have that much value. But for whatever you think about polygraph tests, Jason did pass the polygraph test. So in other words, it seems like he's acting like someone who has nothing to hide. You may think that you're very savvy and you can hide every piece of evidence from your condo and electronically, but there are investigative techniques to uncover things that have been deleted or wiped. So doing so is risky if you have something to hide. And he is absolutely acting like you would expect someone who's innocent to act. The police saw a number of search warrants, around 40 during the investigation. That's a lot. Capital Daily sought the release of some of these warrants to learn the underlying facts of the case. We've talked about this before. You need an affidavit that goes along with the warrant. And usually these are sealed while an investigation is pending, because within the warrant, you have to explain why you believe the search will lead to evidence that can help you further investigate your case. So you have to kind of give up some of your investigative leads within it that you might not be ready to share with the public. And indeed, the Capital Daily did find something like 1,600 pages of documents that were redacted heavily by the courts to prevent interference with the investigation, but they did get a lot of pages. I mean, 1,600 pages, that's a lot of documents. I know 40 search warrants is a lot of search warrants, but we're not talking about like 1-page kind of rubber stamped types of affidavits. It looked like it was a pretty thorough investigation if they have that many pages. Probably you're not going to get a lot of substance in it because the case is obviously unsolved. And so it's not surprising to me that it was so heavily redacted. But what you do know is the volume of pages, which is no small thing. And the affidavits indicated that there were deleted files on Lindsay and Jason's computer, though it's not clear if that was done on purpose or whether they had anything to do with the case. Again, this could be something very simple. I delete things on my computer all the time to free up space. Or it may have been maybe close in time to certain touch points within the case that matter. But all we know generally is that there's the presence of deleted files on their computer.
So whatever's going on with Lindsay's computer, they didn't stop there. They also took a look at her Facebook page. And as the police were reviewing Lindsay's Facebook friends, it became immediately apparent to them that she was friends with a number of people involved in the drug trade. Other people who knew Lindsay said she really used Facebook as a marketing tool, so it was possible that many of her quote-unquote friends were actually real estate contacts. But nevertheless, it is a little unusual that so many people involved in the drug trade were linked to Lindsay, albeit maybe just through her Facebook page. Now, she had hundreds of posted messages on her wall, but for a 2-week period before her death, there were no messages from any of her friends posted on her wall. This was highly unusual for her. And in fact, it was the only time on Lindsay's Facebook page she had that long a gap with nothing on the wall. And so the police sought information from Facebook for those messages, assuming that they must have been deleted. Who deleted them and why is unknown. It's also unclear what the police were able to recover, if there was anything to recover. It seems pretty clear there was something on there that was deleted, but beyond that piece of information, we don't really know exactly where the police's investigation led them.
And again, so much is unknown just because this is still an ongoing investigation, or at least there's hope that hopefully it can be solved one day. And so you don't want all this information out there because you follow lots of leads. A lot of those leads may end nowhere. And so there's no need to really have that out there because you basically have like different pieces of lots of puzzles, and some of those puzzle pieces may not even go on the puzzle piece that you're trying to solve. And this is why we don't know more, and it's appropriate in an ongoing investigation. But based on investigating the phone, the police determined that the killers came from Vancouver to Vancouver Island via a ferry, and the cell phone arrived in the area the day before Lindsay was murdered. Again, kind of going to the thought that this is highly coordinated, highly planned. The phone looked up the address on MapQuest. They then likely cased the area ahead of time, meaning they went there to kind of see maybe where to park, what the situation was in terms of the public seeing what was happening, what are the inlets and outlets to this particular house. They need to have done so based on a striking aspect of this case. The killers didn't pick the location of the murder. Lindsay did because she was showing the house. They let, of course, the real estate agent pick it, Lindsay. And so Lindsay had identified several different houses that fit their requirements, but it was Lindsay who decided where they would go that day. That is really risky to have a massive kind of question mark in your murder plan, and that being the location.
We talked about this before. Murderers like to be comfortable. They like to strike in an area where they have the high ground, that they know well. That's what you'd expect. That's not what you see here. They let Lindsay decide where she was going to die, basically. And they did it knowing that they would have no familiarity with the area. This speaks to the confidence that these people were acting with. This, to me, is not the first time they have killed someone. They knew exactly what they were doing and were able to act without hesitation to kill quickly and then escape, even in a place that was unfamiliar to them.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quests to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and T-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
The Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Hey guys, whether you love true crime or comedies, celebrity interviews, news, or even motivational speakers, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue, right? And guess what? Now you can call the shots on your auto insurance too. Enter the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. The Name Your Price tool puts you in charge of your auto insurance by working just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, then they'll show you a variety of coverages that fit within your budget, giving you options.
Now that's something you'll want to press play on. It's easy to start a quote and you'll be able to choose the best option for you, fast. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive Insurance. Quote today at Progressive.com to try the Name Your Price tool for yourself and join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
For most of us, learning a second language in high school or college wasn't exactly a high point in our academic careers. I know I took Spanish starting in elementary school all the way through college, but unfortunately, I barely remember any of my Spanish and can barely speak it now. But now, thanks to Babbel, the language learning app that sold more than 10 million subscriptions, there's an addictively fun and easy way to learn a new language, whether you'll be traveling abroad, connecting in a deeper way with family, or you just have some free time. Babbel teaches bite-sized language lessons that you'll actually use in the real world.
Yeah, Alice, I chose Spanish. I've been fighting with it, I feel like, since high school, trying to get a grip on it. And I've really enjoyed Babbel. And I got to tell you, it's so easy. Even a baby could do it. Just yesterday, I had my little boy in my lap when I was doing my Babbel session, and I would push play on the word I was supposed to say, and he would repeat it. So that's just how effective Babbel is. And it's easy to use. 15-minute lessons that make it the perfect way to learn a new language on the go. And these are expertly crafted lessons built around real life. You're not wasting your time, and you will be able to learn a language. And you can choose from 14 different languages, including Spanish, French, Italian, and German. Start your new language learning journey today with Babbel. Right now, get up to 55% off your subscription when you go to babbel.com/prosecute. That's babbel.com/prosecute for up to 55% off your subscription. Babbel, language for life. Alice, one of the great things about sponsors like EarthBreeze is getting the opportunity to use their products. And EarthBreeze, my wife used it just yesterday in some of our laundry, and she came out, and you know how she is. She can be a little bit of a skeptic, but she said, I like this product. And you can say that in your next ad, so I'm saying it now. And if you're out there and you're wondering why laundry detergent comes in massive plastic jugs when 91% of those jugs end up in landfills and oceans, and you're thinking, why do we have to do this? And it's not like you can just stop doing laundry. Well, that's where EarthBreeze comes in. EarthBreeze laundry detergent eco sheets look like dryer sheets, but they're not. It's a revolutionary liquidless laundry detergent that dissolves 100% in any wash cycle, hot or cold. No measuring, no mess, and no heavy plastic jugs. Just toss the sheet in.
It's true, Brett. I am doing laundry all day, every day because of 3 little kids who are getting messy all the time. And EarthBreeze has really made the whole concept of detergent better. The packaging is lightweight, biodegradable, and plastic free. And it's great for all laundry lifestyles, even sensitive skin like my baby's skin. Their eco sheets are hypoallergenic and dermatologist tested. EarthBreeze is compatible with high efficiency washers, gray water systems, and is septic safe. Most importantly, you still get a powerful clean. EarthBreeze is tough on stains, fights odors, and your clothes come out clean every time. You can't even tell that my kids have been rolling around in the mud like they do just about every day after a wash through with EarthBreeze. But don't just take our word for it. You can try for yourself with their risk-free 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you don't like it, EarthBreeze will give you a full refund. No questions asked and no return necessary. Switch from the old-fashioned goo to something new. Right now, our listeners can subscribe to EarthBreeze and save 40%. Go to earthbreeze.com/prosecutors to get started. That's earthbreeze.com/prosecutors for 40% off. earthbreeze.com/prosecutors. Angie has made it easier than ever to connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. If you own a home, you know how much work it can take. Whether it's everyday maintenance and repairs or making dream projects a reality, it can be hard just to know where to start. But now, all you need to do is Angie that and find a skilled local pro who will deliver the quality and expertise you need.
And Alice, you can turn to Angie with confidence no matter what the size of your home or the size of your project. Whether you've got a 100-year-old house like I do where it seems like things are always breaking, or if you're renting and you're needing someone to help you with moving, installations, or cleaning, Angie is there for you, and they're there for you with confidence. So, Angie has over 20 years of home service experience, and they've combined it with new tools to simplify the whole process. Bring them your project online or with Angie's app, answer a few questions, and Angie can handle the rest from start to finish. Or they can help you compare quotes from multiple pros and connect instantly, which means you can take care of just about any home project in just a few taps. Because when it comes to getting the most out of your home, you can do this when you Angie that. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com. Check them out today. Angie.com. ANGI.com.
This house, even if they were able to case the area, they could case the surrounding area, but they couldn't get inside the house without a real estate agent. And so they don't know the layout of the house. That's a really big thing because you may walk around your house and be fully comfortable. You know where the bathroom is. You know where the exit door is. And there's multiple exits. We know that there's at least a front door and a back door. There's probably more. And to be in the heat of the moment with that much blood and having just killed someone, there's going to be adrenaline coursing through your veins. To be able to navigate an unfamiliar house, and $1 million house is not going to be like a shotgun house where you can see the entire house from the front door. There's going to be a staircase. We know there's a staircase at least. There are ins and outs of the house. You'll have left your shoes at the front door. You have to navigate back to the front door, then exit in some manner that evades detection. All of this is going to be new and at the time of the murder that this is happening. So this is incredibly bold and, like you said, confident, even cocky of the murderers.
The police, they did the very best they could to figure this out. They dumped the towers that the burner phones had pinged, hoping to find a second phone that the killers would have also had. Since the burner only ever called Lindsay, the assumption was that the killer must have had another phone. And in fact, as we said, it was later discovered that they did. They had a second burner phone. Once the police had those two phones, they cross-referenced the phones, looking for phones that pinged all the towers in the area. The idea being if both phones are pinging the towers, that's when the phones are together. That's definitely the people, and we can follow them. And they tried to do that. They attempted to locate those few numbers they could that matched, that maybe one of the phones called, other than Lindsay's phone, a call from that second phone. But even the ones they were able to match came back to fake names and fake addresses. And it was very clear to the police, based on this review of how these people operated and how they used their phones, that this must have been some sort of organized crime action involving several individuals working together, apparently with one purpose, and that purpose was to kill Lindsay. The motive for that remains unknown.
Yeah, it's not readily apparent that there was some reason that she had to die. So that's basically everything that we know publicly. So what are our theories? And this is, you could go so many directions with this amount of information because there's just so much that's not known to the public that we don't know. But let's talk about kind of a very obvious theory that the police looked into right away, and that's that Jason did it. Jason is the current boyfriend and fiance of Lindsay, so he's an immediate suspect. Sometimes the theory is sexed up by adding in Jason's mother as a co-conspirator, but there are major problems with this theory. First, there are independent witnesses that saw Lindsay meeting with the quote-unquote Mexicans, so people who were not Jason. They aren't a figment of anyone's imagination. These were people who were walking by. We have more than one witness who sees this. And if you think that Jason somehow killed Lindsay after these quote unquote Mexicans left, then you'd have to explain why the Mexicans never came forward and basically say, yeah, we met with Lindsay that day. That's clearly not us. And you'd also have to believe that Jason's friend was also involved in the murder. But there's no evidence of that. So did Jason hire hitmen or maybe a hitwoman too? Also a few issues with this theory. First, where is the money trail? We've talked about this before. Hiring someone to kill someone else. A hitman is not cheap. It's not free, certainly, and usually it involves cold hard cash. And that cash has to come from somewhere. Even if you've been planning it for months, money laundering investigations go back years. It's really hard to actually hide money if someone's looking into it. And we have no indication that there are large sums of money moving around by Jason to unknown individuals. So if Jason hired them, we really should be able to show it through some sort of money trail, even if he used cash, because the cash probably came from somewhere, not a mattress. Second, why did Jason put himself at the scene so soon after the murder to the extent that he saw one of the killers? If he had hired a hitman, usually you want to be very clever. You want to be far from the murder so you have a completely airtight alibi. And maybe you're thinking, Jason is super clever, but finding the body so quickly dramatically increases the possibility that the cops will also nab the killers. This was an incredibly close-run thing. The killers were likely within a few miles of the murder site when the police showed up because Jason found her body so quickly. Had the cops immediately issued a shutdown order and canvassed everyone leaving the island, they'd likely have found them. So if Jason really were to hire a hitman, this just wouldn't be the sequence of events that you would expect him to follow because it makes it such a risky endeavor and increases the likelihood that he and the hitmen would be caught.
It's also really stupid. This is a really stupid theory, and it always surprises me that people believe it because there's really no reason for Jason to do this. Boyfriends kill their girlfriends all the time. They usually just kill them. They usually kill them in a rage. They get mad. They stab them or they strangle them or they hit them or it's kind of an accident. It's a murderous rage. Maybe they even plan it, but they do it themselves. But the idea that he would hire a hitman, not to kill his wife, but to kill his fiancée, is just bizarre. It's a waste of money, number one. Number two, he could just break it off with her. Number three, there's no obvious motive. People come up with all sorts of crazy ideas about why he would have done this, that she was leaving him and his mother had paid for her breast implants and was angry that now she wasn't going to get her money out of it or something. And so that's why it's just ridiculous stuff. And frankly, I find this, people want to talk about ethics and true crime all the time, but I feel like they always miss the actual ethical issues. And one of them, in my mind, is accusing someone of being a murderer when there's absolutely no evidence that they are and that the police have in fact cleared them. Jason didn't do this. His mother didn't do this. And it really needs to stop with them because for at least the last 15 years, they have been harassed and slandered and attacked. And unfortunately, it's not just people in the true crime community who've done it. It's also Lindsay's father. And look, I cannot imagine what it's like to lose a daughter. I cannot imagine it. But Lindsay's father has ran a campaign of disinformation attacking these folks for quite some time. And it has recently ended in litigation, which is horrible because I think what everyone wants is to find out who actually did this. And I understand that he truly believes that Jason and Jason's mother are involved, but they're not. They're not involved. They didn't do this. They didn't kill Lindsay. And the faster people let go of that and focus on the reality of the situation, I think the faster we might actually make some progress to figuring out who did do it. So this is my call for everyone to finally say to themselves and to the world that Jason and his mother had nothing to do with Lindsay's murder, and it's time to move on from that to something that makes sense. Even if Jason was going to kill Lindsay, he wouldn't have done it this way. He certainly would not have located, hired, employed, whatever you want to call it, two just cold-blooded, smooth murderers. These aren't two guys from the corner that got hired for a six-pack of beer to go kill somebody. These people knew exactly what they were doing, and they did it in a very sophisticated way. Jason's not involved.
And here's another point about that. If he did hire hitmen, they would not have, it's very expensive, like we said about hitmen, and they want to, their job is to hit people. They want to get in, get out. They're not going to draw this out from November to basically have this hit take 3 months because there's more of a trail if they communicated with each other. They want to go ahead and get paid. They're not going to get paid until the person's dead. So why wait? If you're hired in November, you're going to kill them in November. You're not going to wait until February. There's not some like reason to wait 3 months to have this happen. And so what we know about this murder is it's been set into motion months before it actually happened. That's not how hits usually work. Hits happen quickly because it is a transaction. If you're going to go to Sonic, to use a Brett example, to buy cherry limeade, you don't wait 3 months to get that cherry limeade. Maybe if you're waiting in line like Brett does, but it's a transaction for a hit. You pay for it, it happens, and you finish your payment on it. You don't wait for a long time about it because it's all about the money for the hitmen.
And there's also only very certain circumstances in which you might have a situation where you have two people who are involved in a murder, one who's a man and one's a woman. And I don't think that's somebody hired a random hitman to kill his girlfriend. That is not the situation you would see that in. We're going to see a situation in a minute where you would see that and probably did see that, but this is not how this went down. It is not a hit. And it is not the boyfriend who did it.
Right. And the fact that I described part of this theory as, sexy, I think should tell you a lot. It feels familiar. It feels like there's a lot you can spin from a story because you know something about Jason and you know something about his mom to go off of. But other than that, I think it's very unlikely. I don't see anything that this is the actual theory of what happened.
Which brings us to what, frankly, should be a less likely theory, but I think is a more likely theory than the boyfriend did it, and that this was somehow random, or it was a serial killer. If it wasn't someone Lindsay knew, could it have been one of these crazy murders that you sometimes see happen? There are serial killers that work in pairs. We talked about this and how that's one of the problems is you have two killers, a man and a woman. And there have been couples who have conspired to kill before. There have been couples who went on killing sprees together. But this murder is so unusual. It was very clearly a planned hit, and a well-planned hit. Killing Lindsay was the point. Not just killing anyone, killing Lindsay. And killing her was all he wanted to do. She wasn't sexually assaulted, and it's hard to imagine a situation in which the killers would have anticipated having any time to spend with Lindsay. However they were going to do this, it would have been evident very quickly that Lindsay was missing. So even if they hadn't been surprised, they weren't planning on spending much time with her. And what we know from Jason is that it seems like they were actually leaving when he got there. So they were ready to go right after they killed Lindsay. They then went back into the building because they had to go out the back to avoid Jason. Now, it is certainly the case that sometimes serial killers kill just to kill, but all of this work, the fake phones, the cover story, the setup, the waiting, like Alice was talking about, seems like more than you'd expect for even the most sophisticated serial killer. And another thing, serial killers also tend to kill where they are comfortable. And one thing that is evident here is, number one, they let Lindsay pick the place, and they weren't from the area. So I think the chances this is a random killing or a serial killing are very unlikely.
If anything, the fact that they let Lindsay pick the spot is recognizing that if she had any doubts about the story, $1 million, have money to spend, have money to burn sort of situation, an almost too good to be true situation, they were letting her kind of get lulled into a sense of security by having her pick the location. Because none of us would think if we had some role in picking a location that would be dangerous, right? She's clearly picking something that she's familiar with, that she knows something about, and she's not walking into kind of an unknown situation. So, it's very sophisticated because that element is working on her psychology to lull her into a sense of security. So, another theory then is that it was a cartel hit. And before you kind of brush it off as a conspiracy theory, because it really does seem so unlikely, like the cartel is talked about all the time, but really how often are kind of random murders the cartel might actually be kind of the most likely one in this case, because this is just such a bizarre case. This was, as we've talked about, a very sophisticated operation that spanned months and a lot of coordination, not just with that second burner phone, but not to carry your own phone with it so it would ping with the other cell towers, kind of knowing the police techniques and investigative techniques, which is probably why the investigation hasn't gone further, is that when you're working with sophisticated operators. They kind of know how to thwart investigative techniques. And whoever killed Lindsay really wasn't some random lowlife from Vancouver. They thought about this for a while, including by purchasing that burner phone 2 months before the murders. This was planned and executed in brutal fashion. You know, we talked about how the witnesses who saw this couple, even though what ended up to be Walmart clothes was at least made to look nice. They knew how to dress the part. So they weren't just some person who was, you know, some vagrant who was trying to make a quick buck or get $20 off some poor real estate lady for their next hit. These people knew how to at least act the part to look like millionaires. And they knew what they were doing. They knew that this was going to be bloody and they were prepared to carry it through. And although a knife attack might seem personal because you have to get very close to a person to kill them with a knife, unlike with a gun, it also has the advantage of being untraceable and silent. Not like a firearm because there's no bullet casings. There are lots of types of knives. You don't have to register knives. You don't have to go to a special gun store and have a record of you buying a firearm. A knife could be just about anything. And there's no gunshot. We've talked about how silencers aren't actually total silencers on a firearm. They're still pretty loud with a silencer. And so if someone hears a gunshot, that puts a point in time. It draws alarm to what's happening inside the house because there should definitely not be a gun going off inside a vacant house where nobody lives and it's up for sale. So there are lots of benefits to having a knife attack, and it kind of shows the sophistication to be able to pull off a knife attack in this manner. What we know is the killers got in, they got out without leaving much of a trace behind, despite it being such a brutal, bloody scene. Now, police have said that Lindsay was targeted and this was not a mistake, but why? The police have also said that Lindsay wasn't involved in any kind of illegal activity. So what happened then? If this was a cartel hit, why Lindsay? Why this kind of just bubbly, young 24-year-old real estate agent? What did she have anything to do with the cartel?
So we return to Erickson de la Cazar. As you guys may recall, de la Cazar was arrested in that massive cocaine bust we talked about just before Lindsay was killed. And either he or a relative of his was friends with Lindsay. And in fact, it seems like Lindsay, during her Christmas vacation, reached out to either him or a friend. This would have happened right as the police were finalizing this drug bust. Now, de la Cazar would eventually receive a sentence of time served after pleading guilty. It's not much of a sentence. Makes me wonder if de la Cazar wasn't talking to someone, or if someone he knew wasn't talking to someone. And it's not hard to imagine that someone may have decided that Lindsay was somehow the link in this organization between what was happening and the police. De la Cazar, for his part, would be arrested in 2017 with several hundred pills that contained fentanyl on him. It's a little unclear exactly what happened to him after this, but clearly this is a life of drugs and crime for him. Now, Lindsay's father, we've talked about him. He's been accused by a lot of people of misinformation in this case. We discussed that. And it's all part of his effort to prove that Lindsay's fiance and his family are responsible for Lindsay's murder. And one of the things he always says is that Lindsay told him that she saw something she shouldn't. He always interprets that as she saw something she shouldn't have seen in the real estate business. And somehow that led to her having to be silenced. A lot of people say that conversation never happened, but what if it did? What if Lindsay really did see something or say something or was around something that she shouldn't have been around? Could that have been what led to this? That somebody in this organization, as this thing is falling down around them, they are looking for someone to blame. The cartel people in Mexico, where this is coming from, are asking, who is responsible for this? Someone has to go down for this. This was a big loss. We got to send a message. You don't do this. You don't rat out the group, and if you do, you die for it. And what if somehow Lindsay's name got thrown out there, even if she had nothing to do with it? If because of some random things that happened and some random connection she had, it was plausible and it was believable. So rather than one of the cartel members losing their life because of their own incompetence or because one of them was a rat, Lindsay is the one who pays the ultimate price. And these people decide they are going to kill Lindsay, and they do it in this very sophisticated, brutal manner in a way that only someone who knew what they were doing and have done something like this before would be able to pull off. We've talked about is this case ever going to be solved? There are names that have arisen in this case. We're not going to name them here, but there's a brother and sister who match the description of the people that Lindsay apparently saw. These people were also apparently involved in the cartel at the time. They have since been deported from Canada into the United States. So good for us. And there's a lot of people who believe that this brother and sister, who are both of Hispanic descent, may be the people who were involved in this. Will this case ever be solved? I don't know. It feels like a case that should be solved. If the cartel did it, there's a lot of people who know. But as we know, silence is enforced with incredible violence in these cartels. And you don't talk about what they've done and the people they've killed. So even the police may know who did this. They may feel confident. They know exactly who the assassins were. Being able to prove that is a very different thing. And we can only hope that with time, this case, someone will decide to speak and tell the truth about what happened to Lindsay.
Yeah, Brett, unfortunately, if this was the cartel, we always say it's very difficult to keep secrets when there's, more than one person involved, except when it comes to the cartel because of the reason you just said. There is a high incentive to stay silent. And what do you have to gain from saying nothing? You will likely lose your life, or loved ones around you will lose their life if you were to speak. So why meddle in something that, what's done is done? It is what happens a lot in this situation. So while it seems like kind of a fantastical theory, with the sophistication of this particular murder, I think it's probably the most likely of anything we have here. But again, we have very limited information. Those 1,600 pages of the 40 search warrants, most of the information is redacted. There's a lot we don't know. The police knows much more. But with that much investigation, I think you're right. They probably know more, but they have been unable to move because of the legal standard to show that the people are the murderers.
Well, that's all we have to say about this case. This is a case that's been heavily requested by people. It's a famous case for obvious reasons and just crazy facts. And one of those that feels like it should be solved given what happened. And I've got to believe if this were a less sophisticated group of murderers, it would have been solved. Hopefully one day it will be. I hope you guys will check out some of the sketches. If you know anything, obviously, let somebody know. Let us know. Keep this story out there. Keep Lindsay's memory alive. She deserves justice. Wallace, do you have a few minutes to answer some questions before we sign off for today?
Let's do it.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, we're doing this thing where we answer questions. If you leave a 5-star review on Apple and leave a question, we'll answer your question for you. If you've left a 5-star review before, you can go in and edit it and add a question, and we will answer your question as well. Let's see. Okay, I have one from Jewel Bug, and it says, I'm a rising 3L and am pursuing a career as a prosecutor. Do you all have any advice for a baby ADA? What do you got, Alice?
Ooh, that's good. Well, first of all, congratulations on making it to 3L. And it's so wonderful that you already know what you want to do, because I definitely did not know when I graduated. I might still not know what I want to do with my life, many years out of law school. But I would say learn from more experienced ADAs than yourself, whether that be watching TV, going to courtrooms and just sitting in and watching, more experienced prosecutors. You don't have to emulate them exactly, because you have to be your own person. They always say don't be someone you're not in the courtroom. You have to be true to who you are. That will come through and ring true to the jury. But see lots of different styles. See, how jurors react to those styles. See how they communicate their ideas and their theories and their stories and their evidence to the judge and to the juries and also to the witnesses. Look at all of these different tactics and then keep what is best for you. Kind of build your own portfolio, but you can only do that by seeing it done in action.
That's great advice, as always, from Alice. Simple things. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you're going to make a lot of them, and that's fine. That's how you learn. And be willing to take on the tough cases. Be willing to lose, because there are too many prosecutors who are not willing to lose. They like to brag they've never lost a case, and it's because they've never tried the tough cases they need to try. And I guess the most important one, we've talked about this before, remember, you always are the good guy. Always. You always wear the white hat. But if you're going to do that, that means there are going to be times where you have to make the tough decision, which is to not prosecute someone because the evidence isn't there. Or when you're well along to prosecute and you realize this is not a just prosecution, to do the right thing and stop. And also, you always want to be the person that no one ever has any questions about your integrity, your providing all the information. You're playing fair. You're not cutting corners. That's how you want to win. And it's much more important to win like that than to win all your cases. And if you do that, you'll be fine. And I have no doubt you'll be fine. And I hope you will keep us informed about how things are going. Let's see. This person has a question for me, so I'll answer that since I put you on the spot there. Alice. Brett, what is your military background? You kind of hinted at a clearance that you have held. Well, I did try and join the Navy JAG Corps once, and they didn't take me. So that's my military background. Failed military background. So I have a clearance because I don't really know why I have one. When I joined the Department of Justice, they, for reasons that are unclear, they just gave me all these clearances. They gave me a top secret clearance with all of this SCI. So I had like through P on the clearance chart. So those of you who know what a Q clearance is, I'm sure you do. Probably just got demonetized for saying that. I had a P. So I was like right there, right? Anyway, and it involved all these things like there would be times where armed men would show up at my office and spirit me away as part of like a continuity of government operation. So I'd go to these like hidden secret bases, 200 feet more below ground. And I remember one time they were driving me around somewhere and I was like, what do they do here? And they said, well, if you don't know, we can't tell you. So it was that kind of thing. It was a wild sort of experience. And I've maintained those clearances to this day because I still do some counterintelligence stuff. And it was just like, I don't know why I have all these clearances and I'm learning all these things. But, after I met the aliens and talked about sort of the Galactic Empire and all that stuff, then I just went back to my desk job. So that's my experience with clearances. Nowhere near as cool as you would think it is. And like I said, the only military background is failed military background.
But the way you talk about the military, Brett knows something about everything. So I would not be surprised if you pulled something out and were like, I actually served, 20 years in this foreign country. But the coolest thing I ever got, I didn't get spirited away to underground bunkers, but the coolest thing I ever did in one of my positions because of my clearance was I got a phone card. You probably got this too, Brett. And all they told me, it was also like armed men who would not tell me more than what exactly I need to know. And they were like, if there is basically like World War III and all the cell towers are down, dial this series of numbers into a phone and it will work. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Do you know something I don't? What's nuclear war? Why are all the cell towers down? Who am I going to call? Who's going to pick up the phone? And they were like, just do it. And they walked away. And I was like, where do I keep this card? Should I, sew it into my underwear? Make sure it's on me at all times? It sounds like a very important phone your friend card.
Yeah, I just kept it in my wallet, which probably wasn't the right place to have it because if I'd gotten robbed, somebody else would have had the card. But, and you're supposed to call it every 6 months to make sure it worked. Did you ever call it?
Heck yeah. I wanted to know who would pick it up on the other line. I wondered if they would have how in war times they always have Marilyn Monroe goes visits the troops overboard. What is it called? Abroad.
Overseas?
Marilyn Monroe or someone would go, abroad to brighten the moods of all the servicemen who are serving in, whatever country. I thought maybe if I called the number, they would have some movie star be like, hey, this is Brad Pitt. How you doing today, Alice? Thanks for calling the number. But that never happened.
Yeah, I don't think that's how it works in the real world, Alice.
Was that just me? Was I the only person who thought that would happen?
And then you would be indoctrinated into the Kingsman or something.
Yeah. Well, I would just be like, wow, I feel so great about working my government job.
Hey, yeah. I gotta admit, that never ran through my mind.
Just me. Okay, great. We can move on from this.
You live in the place you live in, Alice, is it's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place. And
it's a little bit like Wonderland.
I'm proud to know you. Okay, one last question, and then we will sign off for tonight. Let's see. What's a good one? We got a bunch here. I guess I could pick any of them. Okay. Based on your professional experience or on a whim, this is from Bonicello, or maybe Bonicello. I don't know. Anyways, based on your personal experience or on a whim, do you ever wonder if you could commit the perfect crime?
No, I'm way too risk averse, which is why I became a lawyer.
See, I think about it all the time.
I know you do. Crime. I know you do. That's why I answered first.
I mean, sometimes I'll just be sitting somewhere and be like, can I rob that bank? How could I do it? Where would I leave the car? I got to avoid the cameras, like half the time when I'm looking at case files, I'll be thinking, now what would I have done differently here? Well, how could I have gotten away with this? Like, if he hadn't done this thing, he probably would have been. So yeah, I think about it all the time.
Oh my gosh, Brett.
I'm very much a law abider, number one. And number two, I would never hurt anyone. I don't have the heart for it to hurt somebody. So I could never actually, commit the perfect murder because then I'd have to murder somebody. But, I mean, sometimes I wonder, could I be like, the perfect serial killer and just get away with it? Probably not. Usually the people who think they can get away with it aren't the ones who get away with it. Usually the ones who get away with it for a long time are really just the complete idiots. The more sophisticated ones they get caught like the first time. So I guess that's the answer to the question.
So
anyway,
when you guys ask us, you guys always agree on the same things. I think you're beginning to see from these questions just how different Brett and I actually are.
Yeah. Alice doesn't think about cool ways to commit crimes like I do. So
that's one way to put it, Brett.
For you. Anyway. Well, if you enjoyed that and you have a question for us, leave a 5-star review and leave a question and we will answer it. If you have thoughts or comments or if you have any information on any of the cases we talk about, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Join us on Patreon and get these episodes early and ad-free and occasional lives. We're going to get back to those sooner rather than later. We're still shaking out the change in our lives. Got a new baby in the podcast, so got to get her all settled before we can get into a rhythm. Right now, we're kind of doing things by the seat of our pants, but Alice, who loves you all and is amazing, is able to record despite bringing new life into the world. So thank you, Alice. Okay, Alice, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I was just that I love you guys. I mean, truly, this is the only thing that I could or want to be doing in my utter sleepless state. So thanks for hanging with me as I try to think of words that once existed in my brain.
All right, Alice. Well, Alice, we have a big case next week. So
the biggest.
I hope you're ready. I hope everybody's ready. Hope you enjoyed this case because it's going to be the same case for a while. We got a number of episodes coming up on this next one. So looking forward to doing that one with you and can't wait to see you there. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
I'm recording and you are on speaker.
Testing.
So as of literally, what's today, Thursday? 3 days ago, my baby has decided no one can even look at her or touch her who's not mom, or she'll lose her mind. Which is really sweet, but it was a switch. One day she was fine with dad touching her or nanny touching her, and then all of a sudden it was thou shalt not pass.
We're getting way up there on the episodes,
What number is this now? 1,000? Feels like
we're almost to 200.
That's a lot.
And we're almost to 3 years. Can you believe that?
That's actually amazing.
Yeah. That blows my mind. I can't believe that.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code LISTEN50 for 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code LISTEN50.
It's a streaming hot summer on Pluto TV, featuring hit blockbusters during popcorn summer movies. Watch Mark Wahlberg try and solve a murder in Four Brothers, or go on an adventure with an Indiana Jones movie marathon. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies, available live and on demand. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices for free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.